So today we have this great feast day of Saint Sebastian, and I know that many of you have probably heard the story of Saint Sebastian, and his life is a story of love. So he was, in all honesty, he was not that much older than our 8th graders. So he was probably about the age of a senior in high school, so 17, 18 years old. So not that much older than you, but we don't really know exactly how old he was. And he lived in a time in the Roman Empire, which is the western part of the world, we would say, now in Italy. He's from Malta, that area. And so he lived in a time in the Roman Empire when it was illegal for Christians to exist. Christianity was illegal. If you were found out to be worshiping Jesus, you died. And so that was a time, that was the era, that was the culture that he was growing up in. That was the era that he lived in. And so he was found to be a Christian. And so the emperor, his name was Diocletian, which doesn't really matter to you, but the emperor found out and said, I want Sebastian to be killed. So here's this 18-year-old boy, right? 18-year-old kid who is now faced with death. I don't know about you, but at that point, I would almost give up and run. I would say, okay, no, I don't want to die. You know, I like my Xbox. I like pizza on Fridays. I like fun stuff. But Sebastian didn't. He didn't run. Actually went out to preach the gospel, and Diocletian and his guards found him there, and he was killed. He was martyred. The way that he was tried to be killed was he was shot with arrows. Many of us are hunters here. Many of us have shot arrows and caught deer ourselves. We know the power of that. So he was shot repeatedly with arrows, maybe let's say 10, and left to die in the street. And they left the martyrs in the street oftentimes as a sign and a witness to the other Christians to say, look what will happen to you if you do not renounce your faith in God. This will happen to you. Few renounced their faith. Most were gained strength because of what they saw the other martyrs go through. So then everyone thought this great holy soul who was serving other people and preaching the gospel was killed, and they started to mourn him. And this woman, elderly woman, a widow, went out and started to take his body, to prepare his body for burial. And she noticed that he was still living. And so she takes him, sneaks him back to her house, pulls the arrows out, sews him back up, nurses him back to health. She's now a saint. Her name is Saint Irene. If your name is Irene, or your mom or your grandma's name Irene, tell them that. Saint Irene is a great model of help. And so she nurses him back to health, and then all of a sudden Sebastian is restored to life, restored to health. But Sebastian didn't want to go away peacefully. He had every opportunity to run. He had every opportunity now again to hide. He has a second chance to run away, right? He has an opportunity to just, everyone thinks he's dead. But what does he do? He looked at the cross. He looked at Jesus on the cross and he said, that is the price of love. That's the price of love. So this is the crucifix that hangs in my bedroom. Before Christmas, I asked all of you to buy a crucifix, ask your parents for a crucifix, remember? I said, if you don't have a crucifix, you don't have to have one this big. But I asked all of you to get a crucifix. And I said, it has to have the body of Jesus on it, not just a cross, a crucifix, so that you can see the price of love. So I'm going to ask you to bring in all of your crucifixes next week, and we'll bless them at Mass. Even if you didn't get one for Christmas, bring in the one that you have in your room. We'll bless it at Mass. This is the price of love. And Sebastian looked at it. He looked at a crucifix, and he said, I care more about the emperor's soul than I do my life. And so you know what he did? Instead of running away, instead of saying, I'm going to save my life, I'm going to run far from here, he ran to the steps where he knew the emperor was coming down. He stood at the steps as the emperor was coming out of his lunch, and he stood there, and he just looked at the emperor. And just imagine what the emperor is thinking in his mind. He's like, oh my gosh, this is a dead man walking. He's probably thinking, no, I saw you killed. How are you here right now? And so his guards pulled out the swords ready to kill him, and the emperor said no. And so Sebastian stepped forward on the steps. And we don't know what Sebastian said to the emperor there on the steps, but he had a moment with him. My guess is that Sebastian forgave the emperor for trying to kill him, because Sebastian knew the price of love. He knew what love costs, that love costs something, and that the emperor's soul was worth more than his life. And that Jesus had died for Sebastian, and he had died for the emperor also. And then after that, Sebastian walks away, and the emperor says, go ahead. And they clubbed him to death. This time he dies. And so, as we sit there with our crucifix on our walls, sometimes it's my temptation too is just to look at it just as a piece of art. We come in here and we see the crucifix and the risen Jesus, the statues, the art on the wall, and it's just a piece of art. But it's not. Every time that we gaze upon the cross, may we be reminded of the gift of love, that Jesus paid for you to have life, to have eternal life. And it's a reminder to us that God has won for us the prize, should we choose to accept it. Sebastian chose to accept it, and he was willing to lay down his life for another. And that's what you're called to do also. You're called to serve, you're called to lay down your lives, because if you know Jesus, the greatest gift you can do is bring someone else to Jesus, because they don't know the gift of love. But Jesus wants them to know the gift of love. And he wants them to know that he died for them also. And so let's not gaze upon that cross just as a piece of art. But let's know that Jesus has died for us, that he's won for us the great and eternal prize.